Sabrina's 70s comic, issue 26. The story starts out with Harvey being afraid of a tough neighborhood. And I hope Sabrina is just making up an excuse when she says she's not afraid because she has a coward like Harvey to protect her. She's really not scared because she's a witch, I hope. It's not a good start to have her look like an airhead right away. She calls the tough guys bullies and cowards. I guess the reason she thinks they're cowards is that they're picking on someone weaker than them. And after getting one of them to bother Harvey, she casts a spell so that Harvey looks like a monster to the tough guy. So he faints, and the same thing happens to the other tough guy. It seems very hard to believe that so many tough guys desperate for a fight would be here. It would make sense if they had a gun and were asking for money, so they were muggers. But they don't even have guns. Maybe they do and they're just hiding them? Sabrina tells him to never sell himself short again. Making me wonder why she didn't learn a lesson from all the times Harvey becoming confident backfired on him. And just before the predictable could happen, he screams at seeing his scary reflection and faints. And someone assumes he fainted because of the jacket, saying, "It's a dumb looking jacket, but it's nothing to faint about." Which was a kind of impressive snarky line. In the next story, Della shows up and tells Hilda that she's supposed to be looking after Sabrina, not watching TV. Which looks stupid because Sabrina's still right next to her. Really? She's insulting her for watching TV now? You'd think she'd have better things to do. Hilda said she was slaving all day over a hot cauldron making brew, as opposed to using magic to do it. Why don't all the witches cast a spell so that the thing that stirs a cauldron brew stirs itself? Won't every witch do that? She offers her some instant witch's brew, just so I was wondering why a witch would have to slave all day over doing anything. Della says her records show that Sabrina has performed only 1.5 bad deeds in the last month. What's a half bad deed to her? Because she was still impressed by the failed attempts at good deeds. This must be taking place months after the last time she abused her powers. Because didn't she abuse her powers multiple times in one story pretty recently? She tells Hilda and Sabrina to report for a tribunal hearing at Witch's headquarters to waste her time, and says that they might be reassigned to a coven up in the North Pole. That never happened because that changed the status quo. I have to wonder why witches would still have to be cold in the North Pole and prepare witch's brew with an ice pick. They just create warm houses for themselves. Hilda complains that now she'll never get her gold cauldron, which she get after 500 years of flawless service. She wouldn't count as flawless service because she's used magic for good too, and the spy witches can see everything. If every time Sabrina used magic for good has been caught, then every time Hilda used magic for good would also be caught. Like the time she summoned a bunch of toys for kids. Why isn't Zelda with Sabrina too? Sabrina's impressed that the witches' headquarters look so modern. They go to the tribunal, and Ambrose says that witches can only plead the 13th Amendment, and plans on defending them in the trial. This is so ridiculous. Even if he was a lawyer, he's related to them. That'd be a conflict of interest. Maybe he's got law degrees. He's lived a long time. It still seems distractingly fiction-y though. Della shows camera footage of Sabrina wearing platform shoes to prove that she's overly involved in shallow worldly matters. The minute I saw those, I wondered how many times people tripped in those platform shoes. High heels aren't much better. Somehow, the female witches are horrified that Sabrina signed up with a women's lib group. I guess it's because she's sympathizing with mortals. Downtrodden mortals. Female witches are dominant over the male ones, remember. They're only being written this way because the writer knows that Sabrina did a good thing, and the witches are written to be opposed to good things. Ambrose interrupts and says that platform shoes account for more mishaps than any dozen witches can conjure up. Yeah, mishaps against the people wearing the shoes. He holds a newspaper mentioning a record number of foot problems caused by them. Why would that make Sabrina look evil instead of just stupid? How would that help Sabrina's case? Della thinks Sabrina's wasting her time with women's lib. and Ambrose sides with Sabrina. Fortunately, it's brought back that he's mad about female witches dominating the male ones instead of it being forgotten. Our Hex world was pretty stilted dialogue. He asked, what if I, as a warlock, demanded equal rights for male witches? He's told that if he did that, he caused turmoil and confusion in the witch world, even though he's just one person. Ambrose gets them to realize that by advocating women's lib, that's all Sabrina is causing on Earth by siding with women's lib, causing turmoil and confusion. Yeah, a tiny amount, because she's one person. At least he was somehow useful by saying that. I can get their logic. Then Dell shows a bag of cookies Sabrina baked for a local charity, just as I was impressed with Ambrose for being a great lawyer. Much better than Zelda was in the 90s comic. Somehow, the jury thinks sheltering stray dogs is bad. I can understand them not caring about mortals because they're just racist, but this is just ridiculous. I guess she's really not a dog person? You'd think she'd be called out on it. I know there are witch dogs, so that's not it. Then Ambrose asks the jury to sample the cookies, and they hate them. So in a creative twist, Ambrose explains that Sabrina's cookies were just undermining charity, while knowing that her bad cooking was just an accident. So after a measly 3 pieces of evidence, against all the time Sabrina used magic for good, the entire jury decides to find Sabrina and Hilda innocent of all charges. That was fast. This was an interesting story, but it was so forced. They didn't have to take a break and talk to each other in private first. The jury was allowed to just end the trial right there. But this is a jury on a completely different planet that has a nearly incomprehensible society. Not to mention even other countries have different rules around the courts. So I can understand it. No one would say curses unironically. It was dumb enough in the Knuckles comic. Dell complains that she was hoping the jury would give Sabrina 10 years of banishment. I thought she was the head witch. It's good that she's not a total dictator with all the power she wants, like Enchantra. But that's very convenient. I'm just really confused that she's this powerless. What is the appeal of her being the head witch to her? The story ends with Hilda and Sabrina walking away with some Witch of the Year 1975 trophies. As I wonder how on earth Sabrina was found innocent, when Dell specifically said that she could watch her on TV, and there are records of her. So I assumed that Sabrina was famous for being a good witch. In the next story, Harvey considerately feels sorry for Sabrina for having a cold and being unable to leave the house. Or at least he acts like he does. Because of a mere cold, Sabrina had to go see a doctor, who told her to stay in bed for a few days. And she took until now to get a cold instead of almost always having one, so this just makes me jealous of her. What's the big deal about a cold? Why doesn't she have a cure the cold spell? Harvey uses her phone and invites a girl named Helen over, somehow not thinking to tell Sabrina who Helen is. Like he could have told her, she's my cousin, so don't worry about it. So of course she gets jealous, because he's a moron. He takes some candy back, making an excuse that it's bad for her, and at least says he'll be back with another box when she's better. Sabrina casts a spell to make all of the candies full of hot spices. I have to assume she's mistaken about Helen, because there's no proof that she's right, but to be fair, there's also no proof that she's his cousin, and he's not trying to cheat on her. It's just weird to assume that of him. A few stories implied that he was like that, but that's a very recent character derailment of him. She kicks Harvey out because of the candies, and he has no idea why. Sabrina then uses telepathy or something to magically get a reading on the next woman Harvey calls. How lonely is he? He calls up a woman named Gertrude, but instead of being an old lady, it's another young woman. Maybe Sabrina's right about him then. She casts a spell to cause Harvey to shove Gertrude into a fountain and get pulled into it, and he's told to never speak to her again. Sabrina's just so attached to Harvey that she won't break up with him even though she knows he doesn't actually love her. Or at least he's so lonely and desperate that he'll go to another girlfriend the minute he can't be with her. After he takes a woman out for the day, still not getting the hint, Sabrina casts a spell to make it only rain on the two of them, so she takes off because she thinks he's a jinx. You'd think he'd get a clue after all of the other times someone called him a jinx. Then Harvey gives Sabrina the sweets back, and says he likes her because she's the only girl who doesn't bring him bad luck. That's kind of abusive of Sabrina though, basically forcing him to stay with her. She does everything short of outright brainwashing, and tries to make him think it's his idea. Like how Veronica tries to make Archie think that stuff like kissing her is his idea. But I guess it balances itself out because we know Harvey's a klutzy idiot. And wants to cheat on her, all of a sudden. So she's punishing herself. The two deserve each other. They'll never be happy. This was a weird story. I'd imagine Harvey to at the very least be faithful to her. Isn't that his only redeeming quality? That he's a good person? Also, he still gets bad luck when he's with Sabrina. There's so many times where, like, he thinks he beat up a guy, but it was really just Sabrina's magic, and then he tries it again, and then he gets hurt. He got hurt trying to ski without skis because of Sabrina. The first story is about Sabrina casting a spell so that Harvey's face looks scary to all the tough guys trying to hurt them in their neighborhood, which eventually leads to him fainting when he sees his reflection. At least the story was creative enough to avoid the predictable twist where he'd try to bite a guy himself and lose. Still, Sabrina should have known that would happen. In the second story, Della tries to prosecute Sabrina at a trial for being a good person to mortals, but her plan fails because Ambrose proves to the jury that Sabrina's good deeds have negative consequences, especially the cookies. And they immediately buy hook, line, and sinker that the good deeds being bad was intentional on Sabrina's part, even though they would know her better than this, if they can spy on her so easily. I was impressed by how well Ambrose did, but I'm wondering how horrible the court system is if it always allows lawyers to vouch for their family members, which is just nepotism waiting to happen. The final story is about Sabrina forcing Harvey to stay with her by casting curses on him to ruin every date he tries to have with other women. It was shocking to see Harvey like this. He's not like that in the sitcom. Sabrina would look worse here if she was doing this to Harvey after he broke up with her, instead of punishing him for cheating, which is necessary to make her look in the right. I can't blame her for doing this if she really loves Harvey in particular that much. It's heartwarming that she doesn't break up with him after the first time he cheated on her, so I guess she does love him that much. Still, there's unfortunate implications in the fact that she manipulates him into staying with her by giving him no other choice. We don't even get to see his side of the story. There has to be a reason he wanted to date someone else than her the second she was sick, and I don't like it just being that he's a Casanova all of a sudden. What are his problems with her? Does he just not like her short hair? I'm guessing it's Aunt Hilda. Of course he would want a girlfriend that doesn't make him put up with Aunt Hilda all the time, but he doesn't even get to explain that. And I can totally understand that he wouldn't want to get Sabrina's cold by spending time with her, but that would make him look like more of a nice person. It would be more in character for him to have a story where he tries to help her through her cold and he's really clumsy,